Hi, this is Barbara with Fanbase Press here at San Diego Comic-Con with the one and only David Pepose. Hello, David.
Hi, how are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. We have been following your series, Spencer and Locke, since its inception. We're so excited about it. For our viewers who may not be familiar, who didn't catch our podcast interview a few months back, what can you tell us about the premise of the series?
Sure. Our book, just to boil it down as our elevator pitch, it's What If Calvin and Hobbes Grew Up in Sin City? It's about a hard-boiled cop who investigates the murder of his childhood sweetheart, and his partner is his imaginary talking panther, Spencer. So it's really, I've been describing this book, it's about returning to the scene of the crime, not just in terms of Detective Locke investigating who murdered his childhood sweetheart, but also facing down his demons from his very traumatic upbringing and sort of seeing, can he transcend his scars?
Absolutely. And this is a 4-issue series that came out through Action Lab Danger Zone. Just released the 4th and final issue.
Yes, yesterday.
Very exciting. What can you tell us about the experience of just going through the publishing process? You've been on the other side of things with the comic book world in so many different mediums, but as a creator, what can you tell us about your experience?
Everything that I've learned up to this point was just barely enough preparation for this. It's like, I liken it to being in grad school and then starting your very first job.
Sure.
There's only so much academic preparation before you have to put it into practice. And it was an amazing experience. I couldn't be happier with the process of our book and how well it's been received and the way that readers and retailers and the press have really rallied around us. We're kind of the little indie that could right now.
Yes.
And it's been just an amazing collaborative experience, working in particular with my artist and co-creator, Jorge Santiago Jr. He has just been a dream to work with, so talented and ambitious, and he never backed down from any challenges I gave him, which I gave him a lot because I thought if we did a gritty Calvin and Hobbes, we might be in comic book jail after this. So I said, we might as well do everything we possibly can. And he just knocked it all out of the park. And I'm just working with a really fantastic team on this book. And Jason Smith, Colin Bell, Mon House, Joe Mulvey, Ben Torres, and the Action Lab crew. I think it takes a lot of random things to all click to have a book even work in the slightest capacity. And I feel like we've been really fortunate, and I'm just so grateful to everybody who's kind of spread the word about us.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about working with Action Lab Danger Zone? What made it a perfect home for this series?
What really made it such a great home is that Action Lab immediately believed in us. Dave Dwanch, our creative director, he pulled us out of the slush pile. And when I say he pulled us out of the slush pile, he pulled us out that day.
Oh, wow.
And we got a lot of rejections. We got a lot of ghosting on us. We had one publisher say it was the best pitch that they'd never publish.
Oh, no.
And I'll take that as a compliment. But Dave immediately saw the value in our pitch. And not only that, but I think there are a lot of other publishers who I don't think would be as gutsy as Action Lab to print a book that not only is a gritty parody homage of Calvin and Hobbes against Frank Miller, but is also a story about child abuse and mental illness and trauma and depression. And it's a real testament to Action Lab that they trusted us and said, tell the story the way you need to tell it. And I think we were already doing kind of a tightrope, high-wire act with this story. And having a lot of editorial interference with that, I think, could have really blown up in my face in a big way.
Sure.
And so letting Action Lab kind of, the fact that they were so hands-off and said, thread the needle how you need to, it really made all the difference.
Absolutely. And you do a beautiful and wonderful job of depicting mental illness and the effects of trauma and really destigmatizing the issue of mental health in our community. What can you tell us about that process of how did you approach it? What was important to you in relating to your audience?
I think a lot of it was just having empathy for the characters. There is a certain black comedy streak to the book, but I never wanted to make abuse funny. I never wanted to romanticize it or glorify it or make it titillating. And Jorge and I really hashed that out because we don't want to be exploitive, and we certainly don't want. We didn't want 1,000 think pieces about whether or not we were doing the right thing.
Sure.
And so that meant we had to be compassionate about this and not play Locke's mental illness off as a joke. And I think it's hard it's hard not to love somebody when you know their story.
Absolutely.
And seeing Locke as a kid going through all these very harrowing moments. Writing it, I just, you kind of want to give the guy a hug. And in particular, our 4th issue was kind of my way of giving him a hug.
Yeah.
I know that page made our editor cry.
It definitely made me cry.
It's and I think that's in part for me. That's my writing style. Is I never want to work in a series that I don't have characters that I wouldn't want to stick with for the long haul.
Yeah.
And so, being compassionate is kind of the way to do that, and to not look at their individual issues as anything wrong,
Sure.
or to punch down and play it up for laughs. It's this is their life, and I know for me, for Locke, I mean, he's a character that I really fell in love with very quickly, and I think a lot of that has to do with Spencer, and Spencer is his one source of unconditional love, and you learn a lot about a character, not just about what they do, but by how other characters see them. And so having Spencer always have his back and always go out of his way to protect him, but particularly our 3rd issue, I think that goes a long way to making Locke, even though he's very rough around the edges and isn't always the kindest person in the world, it's hard not to root for him when you know what he's been through.
And I think that's the thing, is that you're showing perspective. You're telling someone's story and helping others to understand that for those people who may be out there who may be rough around the edges or a bit socially awkward, that they have a story. There may be a reason behind that.
If any readers feel that way, I would consider that a victory. I would make the whole process worth it. I think we've had a few people come up to us and say, I grew up in an abusive household, or I had an abusive childhood, and your story really spoke to me. And there's no words. It's so humbling, and I want to thank these people, because I tried to put myself in people's shoes, and I tried to do what research I could, but I am speaking outside of my own experience, and I wanted to make sure that we told the story as compassionately as we could. So that no one felt like we were making light of their experience.
Absolutely. And I think you did an absolutely commendable job. Critically, you're doing wonderfully as well. Just audiences, critics alike, are really responding to Spencer and Locke. So congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
And double congratulations, because you had a very exciting announcement earlier this week with the series being optioned.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about this?
So we were optioned by Hitman film producer Adrian Iscaria, and he's fantastic. We spoke to a number of producers on the way to this, and the thing that really stuck out to me about Adrian is that not only was he enthusiastic about the source material, but he was respectful of the tone. And like we were just saying, tone is really what sets our book apart from the rest. And I think at the end of the day, yes, we have our Calvin and Hobbes homages, and yes, we have our sort of Sin City kind of aesthetic, but our tone is the most important thing. And I know some of the producers that we spoke with were sort of looking at it as a more goofy, all-ages kind of comedy. And I have nothing against those. I love those kinds of movies. But it wasn't the kind of story that we were trying to tell. And I recognize, I've worked in television and I've worked in film. I recognize that things change from the page to the screen. It's inevitable. It will not. I probably would not like it if it was a strict page-to-screen adaptation.
Sure.
I like seeing what can be changed and what can be remixed and what can be changed around to preserve the spirit of our story, but for a much wider audience.
Absolutely.
And but the fact that Adrian really respected our tone and didn't try to shy away from it, he really respected particularly our themes about mental illness and trauma, and talking with him, it just felt right. And he's been so enthusiastic, even since we've signed with him. And to see that also his involvement has sparked a new wave of interest in our book. I mean, as a creator, I couldn't be happier. And I'm so excited to be working with him and to give some more news down the road.
And because you have such a wonderful and loving fan base, you've got some fan castings out there already. I'm curious, do you have any fan castings that you'd like to see?
Well, my girlfriend would really love to see Jake Gyllenhaal as Locke, and I've told her if that's the case, she's not allowed on set.
Okay.
I mean, if it were me, I'd love to see Idris Elba as Spencer, but then they probably wouldn't let me on set. So but we've heard some very interesting names, and the fact that people are considering it at all is a very surreal experience, not just as a first-time creator, but somebody who's been on the other side of the table as long as I have been. Yeah. So I feel like if you're going in the Pepose household, I guess Jake Gyllenhaal and Idris Elba. Okay. But that's the beauty of this process, and we're just starting to hash it out now. Is you mention an actor's name, and suddenly you start imagining it, and you're like, oh, that person could be really cool in this role. So I'm very excited to sort of see where things go down the road and see who's interested and what their takes might be.
Well, we're super excited for you and can't wait for all of your successes and many more to come.
Well, we owe it all to you. So
oh, goodness, you're too sweet. For those who may not be able to make it to San Diego Comic-Con this week, where can they find out more information about Spencer and Locke?
Yes, well, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our username is Spencer and Locke. It's just one word, and is spelled out with an E at the end. You will have all sorts of information about that. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's just Pepose D, my last name, first initial, and Jorge Santiago Jr. That's just one word. You can follow both of us. We talk about this book pretty regularly. And otherwise just, stay tuned. And we're very excited to give you guys more news when we can.
Excellent.
And we just want to thank everybody for their support. We couldn't have done this without you, so thank you all.
Well, thank you, David. It was lovely chatting with you, and congrats again on all of the success.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And again, this is Barbara with Fanbase Press here at San Diego Comic-Con. You can find more interviews like this one at fanbasepress.com.